Hi, how's it going? I'm going to give a brief overview for some more languages here today. I've been kind of going through and showing off all the different languages that IEC 61131 and Beckhoff support. I'm going to go ahead and do structured text now. So I've been doing just a basic motor starter in all the different languages. I've got ladder, function block diagram, continuous function chart. Um, So I'm gonna actually I forgot to name that something. So let's right click rename. Let's call this STPOU. So that's just structured text POU. And we're gonna need to add this to our task list. Click OK. All right. So if we come in here, so say for example we have a motor starter that we want to have a start and a stop button and a coil, and when we press the start button, the motor starter comes on. Press the stop button, the motor starter shuts off. It's a really easy, straightforward kind of intro to structured text. Personally, structured text is probably my strongest language in Beckhoff. Um, it's there are some things you can do in structured text that you can't really do in other languages, at least not easily. Um, so let's create our variables first thing. So I'll come into my function block diagram example here, and I'll just steal our variables that we created. All the variables are created the same way in Beckhoff, regardless of language. Um, so if we come into our structured text and dump those in, so we can. There's two ways we can create variables. We can either do it by typing them in manually right here, or we can come into this table view also. I would imagine a lot of people would prefer the table view. It looks a lot prettier. I'm just used to looking at it like this. Like I say, I learned Beckhoff in Twincat 2, and it's just kind of stuck with me. So we're going to go ahead and start this out. The first thing we need to do, or so with structured text, it's a little bit different. I want to make sure, first of all, that if the stop button is being pressed, my coil is not on. So I want the very last thing the PLC does to be to check to make sure that that stop button is not being pressed. So I'm going to drop in an if statement here. So we'll say if button stop. And a little trick here is you can do control space and it'll bring up kind of an IntelliSense sort of window. And you can select the variable and it'll help you autocomplete. So if, that's actually the wrong variable, if button stop is equal to true, then we can just return and it'll put the end if at the end there for us. It's underlined our if statement because we don't have anything going on here. It doesn't really want you to create empty if statements. So if our button stop or if our stop button is pressed, we want to turn off our coil. So let's set this equal to false. So coil is set equal to false, and we need to end with a semicolon. So here again, in structured text, comment, comment, comment. Every time you have an if statement, there should be a comment saying what it is for. If I could learn to type. Okay, so we want this to be the last thing in our program so that if we're holding both buttons down at the same time, our motor starter will be off because off is the safe state for this machine that we've made up. So I'm going to copy the same if statement here because this is also going to be very similar for our start button. So this is more like in ladder where you have a set and a reset coil. That's kind of the thought process going on here. Um, so I'm going to do button start. So if our button start is set equal to true, then we're going to set our coil equal to true. And that's it. So we can log in with an online change. It's going to dump the program in for us. And now we can test it out. So let's try to set our start button to true here. And we can see our coil comes on. If we release the stop button or the start button, our coil stays on. We press the stop button, coil stops or shuts off. We release the stop button, and our coil stays off. So another thing we want to check here is, so say we press our start button, and we're also pressing the stop button at the same time, our coil is off. If we were to have these two statements switched around, so this one at the end of the program, it would not be that way. The coil would be on right now because the start button would take priority over the stop button. I'm just going to set those to false, and so that's pretty much just a really basic overview of structured text. There's, like I say, this deserves probably a whole series of videos, but that's just kind of a good thing to get you going. So have fun coding.